All right, so all right, going back. So Google Apps API, even better, right? Google Apps API is a feature that allows us to, send a password down, and people are like, gosh, why can't I do this when I'm enabling Android for Work? Everybody here is already running Android for Work? Yes, no? Just looking at it? Interested in it? No, this is good. This is a good front for it. And again, ask any questions. And if not too much reflection, I'll see your hand go up. I think these glasses aren't good for everything. So let's go into Google Apps API. So what is it? It's quickly. What is it? Why is it different than? I think we called it Google Apps API when we set it up. And it's tough because Google gave us a bunch of APIs in which to manage devices. Two very different things, similar name. And it's like, how come we can't use them? And I hope to clear that up, and in the end, tell you how you can actually use, Google's GADS, Google Apps Directory Sync, and your IDP to keep your corporate information together, right? So it's a registration between Google and MobileIron, and it creates a communication path between, Google Apps and the client, right? That's what's going on. That's what it appears to be, right? So Google Apps API is a user's out there. He's trying to get his email. He sends to MobileIron and says, hey, give me my email client and my configuration. Before we do that, we actually generate a password in the background. And we send that password to Google. Then we send the configuration back to the client, an active sync, and this is a key word, an active sync configuration back to the client. And that's not an Android client, right? It goes in, the device uses that new password that we created, and the user doesn't know it, but the device knows it, sends that password to Google and gets Google Mail. This isn't Gmail, and in fact, all these apps are not even part of it. When you get it down, it's an Exchange configuration, an API Exchange configuration for it, and again, it was actually made for iOS, right? This is so here it is, and I feel like I burst a big bubble. It's a very unique use case, but when you go to configure Android for Work, it sits right underneath where you configure, right underneath you configure Android for Work is you configure Google Apps API, and it asks for the exact same information. So, of course, it's going to be very confusing and probably, a little bit frustrating. The reason we don't take users, create passwords, and then send them down to Google and do the same thing for Android for Work is we have no method in which to tell the end user, what password to use, and and how do we do that? We don't, on Core and Cloud, we don't store the user's password information. So it becomes a very big challenge. Though we're looking to solve it, nothing's unsolvable, but we don't have an easy way to do this here. So we have what's called, we have GADS. Let me just quickly cover what Android for Work is, though, in case somebody doesn't know. Most people familiar with Android for Work? Good, yeah. So, it's an OS level isolation of data, right? Just to go back through, it's, the neat thing about it, when Google created this, they made it so the user, the user's data, the user's personal data, their pictures and everything else, they maintain control over that. I mean, in their perspective, in the Google approach to it was, you went out, you paid your money for that device as the end user, not the company. This is where the company didn't pay it. The user did. So they own the device, so that means they own the Wi-Fi connections that they select, they own Bluetooth, whether or not the camera is enabled or not enabled, that's all into the user side of things, right? And then the work side, that's what we own as the network or the mobility administrator. So we can take that and we can wipe it, we can grant them access. If they're not compliant, we can pull that access back. We have control over all that. They quit the company, we hit a button, and all their data and their apps that we've given them are now gone off the device, and they just have their device back. It's a great approach, but sometimes very frustrating, especially if you're thinking, oh, I want to use Android for Work, I want to do BYOD, but I'm in a secure, area where no one should have a camera enabled. Well, this isn't the solution. Device owner, where you own the device and the whole device is a work profile, right? So, but it was initially developed for BYOD. and it keeps corporate, corporate data isolated. We can go into some details actually next, but the first thing they have you do is they run out and you sign up for this. This is the sign up page for Google. It's free, and Google has, nothing in life is free, right? They make their money, let's all be honest, they make their money on information. And that information is how many employees you have, your user information, that kind of thing. So, it gets, it's a give and take on what you want to share and what you don't want to share. So, but you go out there, you sign up for this, you're expected to sign up, and then the next thing you're expected to do is called binding. Aditi explained what binding was, but binding is this concept of you create a public-private key pair on Google and on MobileIron, and we have our MSA. They have you have your private key or your public key that you take back. That public key, of course, for their admin console, you put in that. It comes in JSON file format. You put it in there as a file. You put your domain in there, and of course you take your token, and then that says you have permission to talk and create a secure channel to talk to your Google admin instance, right? So, and when you're all done, you basically have a bound session. And then the next step of that whole process is I'm going to allow, what I'm going to allow the devices to do. And in here, with just Android for Work, you've got a limited selection. And if you go in, are most people core or cloud? Core? Most people are on-premise solution. Your cloud? Well, in core, and cloud has a similar. Cloud separates it. There's a different approach. Cloud actually has a separate configuration you go into and set up your lockdown policy, what you're going to allow the user to do. In core, we can have a single lockdown policy, and you'll see under there first what I can do for BYOD users, and then added to that what device owners. So if I own the whole device, I have a whole bunch of more restrictions, as they call them, to allow or deny these users from using it. So configuring user credentials. This is an important one, the second one down. Allow the user to create and modify accounts. In the work profile, you'll go into your accounts, you'll see a user profile and a work profile. That enables or disables the ability to add user accounts. If you uncheck that box, the user can go in there and put their own credentials into the work profile, and now can put in whatever app they want from their personal profile. So that's something to keep in mind, and so that's an important one to keep checked, right? And then of course we've got the configuration side. So Android for Work allows you to push a configuration in the background dynamically. As you can see, we use dynamic variables based on LDAP. We push those dynamic variables down. We can even do single sign-on if we had an Exchange Kerberos cert. I saw earlier our Android PM gave a presentation on it, and he showed this configuration for email, and he actually put in the raw cert, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's going to look intimidating. The neat thing about it, all you have to do is put in your certificate alias. On cloud, that's coming soon. You can't use the certificates like that on cloud, but on-prem, you have the capability to put in your certificates, and then there's an alias. So that's the alias, just FYI, is when you go in and create your SCEP profile, and to push your SCEP, that's the name you call that SCEP profile. And that's all you do. You put in that name of that SCEP profile, it pushes that cert to the user. The first time the user uses Divide Productivity, for example, he'll click on it and he'll select that certificate, and then all is running, and he doesn't have to worry about the back-end credentials. Maybe you'll require him to do his first authentication, but then email flows just like they expect it to. A little too much information, but it's late on a Thursday, right? All right. So then the final thing is registering the client. So the client will go out, insert his credentials. I had to bounce between core and cloud. Now I'm back to cloud. This is the Mobile Go client. The client will go in, insert a username, be redirected out, which I don't show on the screen, redirected out where they insert credentials again. And that's the point, and I should have included that image. That's the important point we're really covering in this session is what information do I have to share with Google and why? So you get to a point that says, I'm going to inflate my work profile. Something happens there. First, I've actually downloaded the Go or the Mobile at Work client. that client goes disabled, and a badged version of the same binary comes up, and you'll see it shut down. But in between, it actually gets redirected out to Google, where the user has to enter in their credentials. How we get those credentials we'll show next, but enters those credentials, then they'll come back, and now they'll have, this is called the DPC, the Mobile at Work or the Go client is our DPC that'll run in here, and now he'll show up as a badged icon on the tray, right? And all the apps that come down through the work profile will show up as badged, right? Work and personal. This is a Nexus 9 capture that I did as a demo, and I put the apps on top of each other so you can quickly see the difference. One nice thing about Android for Work over, say, a container, like we would for our App Connect, is that's one single binary. That means, you conserve space because you're not downloading two photo apps or two Chrome apps or two Drive apps. They're one app, but one binary, but the data is kept separate. You can run two instances of the same application, right? So it's a pretty powerful solution, on that front. Okay, so kind of jump into the meat of this, and I hope there's some questions on this. But GADS, so this is called Google Apps Directory Sync, and and then you can use your favorite IDP, your identity provider. We have MIACME over here in the demo area, where we have the same thing. If we reset a device, we go out and set up, you'll see us be redirected to our ADFS. We use ADFS for our identity provider, and then the idea is that the only thing I share with Google is the users that I want to run for Android for Work. They only see those users that I'm permitting them to see. That could be, I could identify it by groups. It could just be all my users, but they only see the users. But the password, I'm keeping as much as I can in-house, right? And then, so it's only the data necessary that you want to share. I mean, Google asks for quite a bit. So what is, how do you actually install GADS? You actually go out to Google on GADS. You'll see if you have a Linux domain, you can download a 64-bit or a 32-bit app of each one. It needs to run on a member of the domain that you have. Once you run it, you're going to be asked to provide certain pieces of information, right? So so we launch GADS. It's just a Windows 10, in a Windows 10 screenshot. I'm running this on Windows, Windows 10 server. On one of my backup domain controllers. It doesn't even have to be a backup domain controller. It just has to be a member of the domain so it can communicate to your Active Directory. You're going to go in there, and you're going to sync a bit of information. And I put this up, and this was actually in the last presentation too. This is what Google allows, and I think, would like you to sync with them. But this is information, right? None of this is needed for Android for Work except for the username. There has to be a password, and of course we can do that via an IDP, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the user information is the most important piece of it. Extended user information, the shared folders, rooms, they don't need any of that. None of that needs to be there, not unless you're actually running Google Apps, right? So, you're going to configure your parameters. Obviously the user accounts, and I think, groups might be interesting. You don't need groups at all. You'll go out there and you can map it. Someone asked, how do I have multiple domains? And this becomes a little bit of a challenge if you have 300 domains and I'm running Android for Work on one core instance. I can actually map my information to a single domain. I can take my usernames and create them all in one domain, or I can just validate all my domains on Google, and I just send them email address only. So I'll map it there. Once I've mapped it there, I'm going to configure my LDAP connection. So I set up my LDAP credentials. You don't have to use the administrator account. I was being lazy. But you go out there and you create an administrator account. You insert your password, and then you click connect. It'll show you're connected. The next thing you do is you actually have to authorize this. This is quite simple. You go out, you click on that authorized button. It's going to send you out to Google, where you get this long string that you simply paste back into. Oh, hold on. I was impatient, where you simply paste back into and validate. Once you've validated that, it goes, success. So it's a super simple app, in fact, almost too simple to hand your information off to Google, right? So now you're set to go. It does a one-time sync with Google. This one-time sync pushes all your passwords. It's a one-way sync, I should say. I said one time. It's not one time. Every time you change anything about that user, if the user updates its password and you're sending passwords to Google, you can force it to run, and it doesn't run consistently. I find you have to go out and actually trigger it. So it's, sometimes, you're not adding users as often as users are changing their passwords. So there's even a better reason to have your IDP in place, right? But you send out all your user information, then the user goes to register with Google. When they go to register for Google, Google goes, oh hey, and you've gone in, you'll set up my SSO, and you'll point to your IDP, in our case ADFS. Google sends back the user and says you need to go to ADFS, which presents we use our personal customized ADFS icon. You probably played with ADFS and you have your own company logo on there. You'll insert your credentials. The server's going to send back a token. We all know how ADFS works, but sends back a user token to the client. The client shares that token with Google. And then Google goes, you've got permission, and then lets the client create that work profile that we know about. So that, in this way, you've only shared your passwords that and if you're groups, if you can create an LDAP group, and your users can say, if you're going to be Android for Work, I have to add you to the Android for Work LDAP group. That could be a way to limit which users actually go out there. And that's probably a good way, especially in this early phases of what I call early phases, pre-in versions of Android for Work. Things are constantly improving, but I feel like I've been talking a mile a minute. Now my mouth's all dry. But as things go along, people need to understand the risks, and you can get your feet and understand the feel and the control you have over the device client. So having that LDAP group, it might be a little overhead for your IT administrator at first, but it could be one way to control who can use and inflate Android for Work profile, right? And I think at that point, I'm going to stop